Hello, it's Trigger Joe, and welcome to From the Depths 2.4.1.3. And I'm going to be showcasing everything that has been added to the game. And that was a convoluted way to say it. Regardless, let's just get into it. So let's just start with a couple things that I have noticed being added between me covering the update and not, and like the last time. So they added these hatches. These are a new thing. They're basically, I assume there's something so that you can like jump down a hole, because you can't normally fit through this. Well, you can, it's just weird when you do that. I'm just going to get rid of that. Also, I accidentally placed them. Yeah, there's a metal and alloy variant for that. So that's the first thing. They also added chains, which I know I've seen other people cover, and I failed to cover this. But yes, we have chains. Now those are things from the last update, aside from actually these coal piles, which, yeah, those were added in between updates, I know that for sure. So I'm going to get rid of those too. Some major things have been added. A more major thing that had been added between updates: large steam engines. I actually don't know if I covered this or not. I haven't really had time to check, to be honest. But I'm going to say goodbye to this. It's basically exactly what it seems. But before I do that, I want to demonstrate something, and I'm going to need its extra power. I have storage laser. I have this new block. It doesn't have a model yet, or maybe this is the model. I don't know what the plan for this is, but I assume this is just a placeholder in the end. But we have an output regulator, and this attaches to any of these connections, including the multi-purpose laser, but I don't think it connects to this. Yeah, it doesn't connect to this. Right now, this is disconnected. And what this does, if we go into the E menu, it makes it use a percentage of the cavity's maximum energy instead of its current. So if I turn this on now with it disconnected, it'll display the normal behavior of firing until it hits equilibrium, and then it stays there. Now I'm going to disable that so that it can fill back up. Let's see what happens when we put this output regulator. Pay close attention to the damage per next shot. So normally, it was dropping to about 1500. If we start firing now, you can see damage next shot stays the same, but it drops fast. And yeah, so this is for when you want to fire in bursts, in like rapid bursts. And you want to make sure you're using all of your power. This is what you want. You want the output regulator to make sure you don't get a drop in damage. But of course, the drawback to that is that it drains very quickly and will completely tap out its laser storage, ultimately leading to you dealing a lot less damage in a sustained fire. So that's something important to note. And of course, if I disconnect it, you can tell it's starting to reach equilibrium again. So yeah, so if you have a weapon that has a sustained fire, you probably don't want the output regulator, but if you have something like maybe like an AA mount or something that only fires temporarily, having that output regulator put on there might actually be a wise choice, and it might be good for LEMS systems that have a large amount of storage but not as much generation, as you want to make sure you have the maximum amount of damage available for as long as possible, because the actual amount of sustained damage you can do is already negligible. So right now, you recognize the heat decoy. It's a heat decoy. We now also have a sonar decoy. That's a sonar decoy. And a radar decoy, which is a radar decoy. Right now it's not doing anything because I also have a chaff emitter, which is set on max. If I disable this, this should actually show that it has a 100% chance to draw radar missiles. Now, of course, that would be a big issue, but it isn't. because we have signal processors, which were recently added. Now these are just a flat bonus. If I remove this and replace it with the body, you see there's no bonus there. If I put this back on, 20%, it's like it's reduced to 20%. So suddenly it is able to filter out 80% of all missiles. Its strength depends on the size of missiles, and this is the smallest missile. If I have multiple signal processors, it does absolutely nothing. We have the sticky flare as usual. You can also have a sonar target simulator and a radar target simulator, and those act exactly like a sticky flare, but they're actually more permanent because sticky flare drops off. You can have like a missile that drips flares, basically, but not the sonar and radar flares. Also, I failed to mention earlier when I was around the coal, we have raw resource containers. This is actually how much it stores. It's 54,000 resources in a really small space for what it is. It's over twice as dense of a storage medium, but it's also incredibly heavy. And if I drop this into the water, you can see how heavy that is. And the entire thing sinks. So I'm going to remove that. In fact, I'm going to remove all of the excess stuff here, as I no longer need that for my demonstration. So I'm just going to get rid of those, including the steam engine. So now we can go and mess with the AI stuff. Of course, I had the PID and the back tuned for something else, but this is actually a good thing to demonstrate. So now you can actually assign how propulsion systems respond to each input. And so this one's set to manage roll. And as you can see here, it's actually responding to it. Of course, it's oversaturated, so we're getting this nausea-inducing thing. So with this, you can actually have it select the different things. So you could have, for example, like height and pitch, for example, be linked. Or you could have secondary and primary and tertiary stimulation, like propulsion control, things like that, air pump fraction control. And yeah, so this one's set to roll. Its gain is a lot higher, so I'm going to significantly reduce it, and what this should do is actually, yeah, now it's a lot nicer, it's a lot friendlier. Of course, it's spinning around. Something changed with the physics, so rudders seem to become a pivot now, or it might just be the positioning of this. It could also be the positioning of that. But yeah, you can now like reassign settings for these. So yeah, and before I get into the actual AI settings, which they have their own settings, and I can explore them through this hovercraft and this... the rocket fell out of the sky. I'll replace the rocket. I'll show you the rocket too. Actually, before I get into the more complex stuff, just want to show you the simple joy that is lead blocks can now have slopes, beams, they have all of the parts. Same thing with rubber, actually. So you could, for example, at the nose of your ship, just insert, for no reason... What? That's not right. Bear with me. Rubber pull. Is that actually... Oh! So clicking on this actually does something. I didn't know that did something. But yeah, so I could do something stupid like this and have like a pole made of rubber on the front. I'm obviously not keeping that because the abomination is an abomination no more. So yeah, so that aside, we now have a breed board. I have not tested this. I do not really intend to test this until it, in the menu, says it's no longer a prototype, because it crashed on me while I was messing around. So there's clearly not any auto debugging or anything. It can just crash the game. But what it looks like is a way to create your own algorithms to drive things. And that's pretty exciting, and I hope it can, for the most part, wind up doing things that ACBs couldn't, like perform complex logic on ACB conditions. That would be pretty useful. But for now, we don't actually need this. ACB settings are the same as they were before, except that the menu changed slightly. One thing just to be wary of, if any of your menus seem incomplete like this, or like cut off, you can drag it from this corner, like I did. So that's important. And then the final thing. So here we have behaviors, which this is messy. So let me just delete everything. And I'm just going to walk you through this. And then I'm going to add extra settings. So we want to have like an old school naval AI, and I'm just going to delete this because this is actually all you need for a naval AI in reality. So let's just go and say old school naval. We could also add a broadside, but broadside only broadsides to one side. I don't know why it's like that. So we can select this. If we click on this, it enables. If we click, it's now active. So we've added this and now we clicked it, it's active. But it doesn't know how to maneuver, but it does assign a default naval maneuver routine. We're going to disable that and just add this one, make that active. And that should be everything. So that's the AI. And if we actually enable this, this might need forward propulsion enabled. Yeah, so one issue it has is it will not, for whatever reason, it does not use the primary drive. And I think the reason why it's not using primary drive is because I actually changed my own key bindings. That could be a problem. And of course, key bindings are actually a little problematic because it seems to default to aircraft controls no matter what I do. Oh well. But as you can see, I could set this, it to non-reversible if I wanted, instantaneous. And like there are a lot of different settings here that you can use to adjust how it responds. This does not use any general purpose PIDs. Honestly, doing it like this is probably unwise. But I did have to manually assign things. So there are a few things that are normally impossible with this type of design that I managed to do. And that is that I have multiple axis angles. Like each thruster is responsible for 2 different control inputs. So normally you'd have to align it so that it's like front, back, left, right. I had to change this. And so this is up, pitch up, and roll left. And each setting is actually its own setting. So as you can see here, they're all configured independent of each other in order to account for their quadrants. This is quite important. And right now it's using old land AI and things. Now PIDs are kind of weird, so I could assign like a PID for strafe, but since I don't have one, it's just doing like maximum, it's just doing a maximum like flip-flop. I could set a default behavior and this would give it a response width. It's going to basically have off periods, and I should actually probably have this setting, to be honest. We're just going to leave it like this so that it's not constantly trying to do all those movements. You can set the same thing, except that I have a yaw PID, so that's not an issue. But as you can see, now it's a little more reasonable of a setting. There are still things that I don't know how to do, like have manually assigned settings, like for hovering things, it just crashes for some reason. So I don't know what's going on with that, but basically, you do have to have an AI PID hooked up. You have to go and you have to select what it's allowed to do. And so I just have 4 PIDs. But in order to get smooth movement, you have to do that. If I were to remove all of these, you'll notice it just bounces around and doesn't know what it's doing. And this will still fly, but without the support of those extra PIDs, it cannot fly well. Anyway, I'm going to destroy this example. And I'm going to spawn in a good dog. So, a boat animation should be in combat, but it isn't. Why isn't it? Okay, now it is. So it is in fact working. And you can see its path. So without any supporting things, it has naval AI behaviors. Now say I wanted to have like multiple weirdly offset propellers, you can add in additional routines and behaviors. And this does seem to reset the AI whenever you change the settings, which is a little unfortunate, but we can just say add thruster balancing. This is active. If we click it, it's disabled. Now we turn it on, it's enabled. And since this thruster is actually in line with the mass, it's going to turn this one off. And as you can see, even if I try to set it, it turns off because it's not in line with center of mass. If I were to go to this and disable it, oh, that's the wrong thing, then it disables behavior. And it should be perfectly fine now with just moving forward, which it is. So that's just kind of a showcase. For every new algorithm you add, you put that in, but you still do need to have target prioritization and aim point selection, and these are the same as always. I have a rocket, and this rocket also only uses AI PIDs, but it also has no actual AI. So as you can see here, it's floating, but as you can see, there's only one downwards facing thruster. And I remember trying to do this before with like the relay rockets, which you might have seen those. I'm not going to put a screenshot or anything or that I say as I do exactly that, but I had to work around the fact that I couldn't have actual rocket-like controls for it. And it was a bit of an issue. But as you can see here, these propulsion systems, I manually configure them all, and they allow the system to hover in place using just one thruster on the bottom and then a bunch of thrusters on the top for maneuvering. Now, just to prove that it works and that I don't just have like a magical trapeze axe going on, I'm going to place a beam here, remove the beam. As you can see, it is bouncing. Do the same thing here. And it does recover itself. And it is using those upper thrusters. In fact, this one should be max. This one should start responding soon. Yep, there we go. And it will oscillate for a bit, but it'll eventually settle, and then it's perfectly stable. Obviously, I've tuned this a little soft, but not a big deal. It'll eventually settle, unless I'm kidding myself. But either way, that is what this update offers. You can do so many things, and this isn't even the start of it. It's a lot more configurable, and everything's a lot more flexible, and as you can see, I can even have pretty complex AIs with far less space, actually. And so you can expect a revolutionary, like I might just start redoing all of my designs at some point, but this shouldn't affect anything I have in the campaign. Yeah, that is all I have for this showcase. It's a little different. I didn't have the same amount of time or research, unfortunately, but that is all I could find. And if there's anything I missed, let me know, and I will probably do a follow-up on it eventually. See ya next time.